Title: No War Tomorrow. Author: Wallace West. As a slow lightening of the cloud blanket indicated dawn, Sadie and Frank took places among some 50 Incers who were heading out from Venusport into Wild Oasia. Like the others, they were dressed in heavy coveralls. Each carried a Tommy gun, a knapsack stuffed with food and necessities, and a money belt containing the 5,000 gold dollars without which no man or woman was allowed to cross the last frontier. The Incers were a wild lot. Mostly young, high-spirited or spoiled people who rebelled at the strict moral standards of United Stars. In spite of themselves, both Frank and the girl felt strongly drawn to this group. They felt no sympathy for a scattering of older Incers whose hard-bitten faces indicated that they had run afoul of U.S. law and were being shipped over, the only major punishment permitted within the solar system. "Say, chum." A beetle-browed youth sidled over to Sadie as they left the port and plunged into the sweating jungle. "Do you reckon it's as tough in Wild Oasia as they make out in that indoctrination course?" "It's plenty tough," she answered out of the corner of her mouth. "Been there before? What's it to you?" As he started to protest, she added, "The first law of Wild Oasia is not to ask personal questions." "Watch him," the girl whispered to Frank as Beetlebrow retreated. "I smell Pumper." "Oh, he's just a dumb kid. Emmy-BBzo. Emmy-BBzo. Watch him anyway." It was a dismal trip. The eternal drizzle soaked them to the skin. A few hardy jitbugs chewed at them. From time to time blood-sucking plant animals along the muddy trail snaked out prehensile branches. Then there was much swearing and hacking with machetes until the white-faced victims freed themselves. The skylarking with which the Incers had celebrated their departure from Venusport dwindled and died. In fact, it became evident as the day progressed that Beetlebrow, at least, was losing his nerve. He snarled curses on the journey. He buttonholed lagging companions and muttered about the advisability of returning to Venusport. He yelled like a frightened child when branches reached for him. Only when more hardy travelers threatened to kick him out of the group did he subside. "That kid's a menace," Frank groaned at last. "He'll wreck the morale of all of us. I'll bet he's doing it deliberately." Sadie squashed a jitbug which had chewed its way through the mosquito netting draped from her helmet. "A Pumper. No doubt of it." Things came to a head when camp was made for the night on a high and relatively uninfested ridge. Their Beetlebrow grew suddenly brave and argued against Sadie's proposal that sentries be posted. "There ain't no danger," he whined. "Skimores don't climb this high. We all ought to get a good night's sleep so we'll be on our toes when we get to Nirvana tomorrow." When Sadie's counsel prevailed, the fellow picked up his blankets and stalked into the darkness to sleep by himself. "I agree with you," said Frank when he and Sadie were rolled snugly in their waterproofs near a smudge. She wriggled into a more comfortable position on the sodden ground. "I told the sentries to keep an eye on him. Say," he continued softly, "on your idea for a war substitute. Why not break down and explain it to me?" "Haven't explained it to myself yet," she yawned. "That professor who named me Sadie Thompson when we were concentrated once. Because it rains all the time here, you know. He told me about how, in the Middle Ages, when two armies were too well matched to fight, each would select its best knight to represent it. Now what did he call them? Champions?" Frank rose on one elbow. "That's it. So the champions would joust, was it? And the army whose champ won would be declared the victor. Do you think either the US or the Bees would agree to any such harebrained scheme as that? They would if they had to. But the big shots glory in having no sense of honor. Under their crazy code, they'd be bound to double-cross us if they lost. But they couldn't lose, could they? Not if they've learned how to disintegrate atoms. Her voice sounded far away. I don't get you. What's the use of our side putting up a champion if he's sure to lose? I didn't say our side would lose. Or did I? She yawned again. I'm dog-tired and all mixed up. Haven't taken a hike like this since we marched on Venusport. Kiss me goodnight. Beetlebrow says we have to be on our toes in the morning. Frank lay awake a long time, listening to jungle sounds and struggling over her paradox. He dozed off to be jerked awake by a burst of gunfire. It was from the sentries. Their quick action alone saved the little party as a horde of wild-eyed, ragged savages poured up the ridge toward them in the dawnlight. Sadie was out of her blankets and yelling orders even as she knuckled the sleep from her eyes. Take cover, she shouted. Spread out. Wear grenades. Hold your fire. She spoke with the authority of a girl who had grown up as a jungle outlaw. As the others jumped to obey, Frank crawled through the bituweed to see whether their defense circle was complete. He found it so, except where the ridge ended in a steep declivity. Fire! Screamed their self-appointed commander as the gaunt figures of their attackers loomed through the fog. A storm of Tommy gun bullets sent the enemy flying, except for a dozen who lay writhing. They're poor devils of Inkers who've been waylaid and robbed by some big shot patrol, Sadie explained grimly as the shooting died. They'll come again. They've either got to make another stake, let themselves be concentrated, or starve. It was at this moment that Beetlebrow went mad. Throwing away his gun, he began running along the edge of the cliff, waving his arms and alternately shouting curses at the enemy and screaming for mercy. Without a second's hesitation, Sadie swung her weapon and pressed the trigger. Beetlebrow went over the cliff. My God! What did you do that for? Frank looked at her aghast. I think he was signaling for an attack up the cliff. Get a detail deployed over there fast. Why? The kid cracked up. In that case he didn't belong in Waldorasha and I did him a service. Quick, that detail. Surely enough, when they reached the cliff top they found 20 of the frozen enemy toiling up toward them. This time their fire did real execution. The few survivors fled like lost souls. Mindful that they must reach Nirvana before nightfall if they expected to enter its wall, the Inkers, who had survived the battle with hardly a scratch, packed knapsacks and plunged again down the trail. Once they detoured a heavily guarded convoy of ore trucks en route to Venusport. Once their enemies of the morning tried another ambush. Nevertheless they made good progress and caught sight of the mist-shrouded battlements of their destination while it was still light. Here Sadie called a halt. Fellow Inkers, she cried as she leaped onto a rock, you're entering Waldorasha proper. From now on each one of us is on his own. You all know the laws here, might makes right. Dog eat dog. Devil take the hindmost. No cooperation. No partnerships. No friendships. Even handshaking is illegal. If you are robbed or cheated, don't go running to the police. They'll laugh at you. Maybe they'll slap you in a concentration camp where you'll work a year to pay your fine. You get only 3 breaks in Waldorasha. If anyone swipes your gun, he has to leave a shooting iron of some kind in exchange. If you're arrested and escape, you can't be picked up again on the same charge after 5 hours have passed. And if you manage to beg, borrow, earn or steal $1 million, you automatically become a big shot with all rights, privileges and immunities. Wait a minute, miss. The speaker was raw-boned and bow-legged, as though from riding herd on some faraway cattle ranch. Ain't they no way a feller can get help if he finds himself in a jam? There are 2 ways. First, you can return to Venusport and promise the SP that you'll go straight. She bit her lip and hesitated. Maybe I shouldn't tell you the other way this early in the game, but I will. If you've got the guts, you can join the underground. Then you'll have a sporting chance of getting to civilization. The underground, sang out a downy youth from Mars. The indoctrinator said you can get shot just for joining it. That's right. I said you had to have guts. Well, good luck, folks. You've made a good start. Only one group of Inkers out of 3 ever gets to Nirvana without being hijacked. Let's go. She jumped from her perch and stalked off toward the town which rose, like a scene from fairyland, before them.